Amy, Emily?
Thank you.
Sorry.
It was Chris's fault.
What are you? Big pot Florida. With your footprint on it. Thank you so much. You need not start at the top.
Okay. So just going through the steps of our program, we will complete a technical site visit. We gather on-site specific information that's needed to dial in and provide you with financial modeling to review and evaluate. There are a couple ways that you can approach solar in Connecticut. There is a new incentive program that launched. We're in year 3 of it now. It's called the NRES program, if that sounds familiar to anyone.
Could you spell that? Yeah, spell that.
It's NRES. So it's the non-residential solar incentive or the commercial incentive program here in the state.
And a municipality falls under that one?
Yes. Generally speaking, there might be some one-off metering situations where you don't fall in that category, but most of the time it would be in the commercial incentive program. So most often what we see in terms of project development is 2 options for municipal projects. First is something called a PPA, or a power purchase agreement. May sound familiar to some of you. Under the new incentive program, the power purchase agreement has really been simplified, so I'll kind of explain what has happened. PPA high level is a great option for municipalities because there's 0 capital outlay that's required. So if you participate in the MAP program that I just described, the Green Bank will complete that initial technical review for you, assuming that we put together financial modeling that makes sense and it's something that you want to pursue. The Green Bank would ultimately be the system of that set in the long term. We provide the capital to complete the contract.
Let me ask a question there. It's no cost to us to get started on something like that. Where would it be a situation where we wouldn't want to do that? If we have sites that could easily accept solar, where would we not want? What would be like a negative that one would say, no, we shouldn't do that?
Yes. So the only scenario where it's not going to make sense is a scenario where you may want to own the system. So if you think you have the capital or would receive a grant or a low interest loan to be able to develop a project and own it directly, then an ownership scenario will always make more sense. It's just a matter of capital deployment, whether or not you want to take on a debt service.
But generally, I mean, if it's we're a small municipality, that still fits a small municipality. It could still fit maybe even a smaller type of solar array or so. It all still would work. It would have a benefit to the municipality on a PPA.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
My pleasure. So you have a good point. When I say power purchase agreement, is anyone here familiar with solar in general? Have you talked about developed projects in the past?
I understand that would be, we would contract with somebody. We're going to buy power from them effectively behind the meter, okay, directly from them, from the array that they install at a certain rate over a period of time. Is that?
Yes, so that is one way to do a PPA, and I'll explain it. So there's 2 different ways that you can approach the incentive program in Connecticut. There's an incentive that's called a netting incentive. What that is for scenarios that Peter just described, where you're tying in behind a specific utility meter on site. And in a power purchase agreement scenario, somebody owns the system and the municipality would purchasing power from that system owner at a discounted rate that's fixed for a full 20-year term. So that's a traditional PPA. There's a new option under the new incentive program. We also refer to it as a PPA, so stay with me here. If you get confused, raise your hand and I can re-explain it. But in the new scenario, it's actually much easier to understand, in my opinion. The way that it works is we will be designing a system based off of either the available square footage on site at a facility. So if you have a vast amount of roof space, we can max it out. Or it could be based off of the on-site load for the facility, depending on which app available. But in this scenario, we're sizing the array, we're gonna install a new electrical service on site. It's called a front of the meter system, so we're not tying in behind your utility meter, we're actually feeding the energy back to the grid. And this type of power purchase agreement, which is what the Green Bank traditionally utilizes, there's going to be a fixed revenue contract with the utility company for a full 20-year term, where they're gonna purchase the power that that system produces at a fixed rate for the full duration of the 20-year contract. You're gonna receive a monetary credit on your utility bill directly from the utility company on a monthly basis. The Green Bank will take a portion of that incentive to recoup our investment in the equipment, but it's easier in many cases because you're not actually cutting the Green Bank a check for the power that the system is producing. You're just receiving that monetary credit directly from the utility company. Go ahead.
So there's a fixed cost, fixed revenue, which if you will, is there a fixed cost on purchasing electric to the utility?
So good question. So you could still utilize a third-party supply contract, for example. So I heard you guys mention Titan Energy. I assume Adam may have been here. I don't know if that was one thing he was talking to you about or if it was about solar as well. But if you have a discounted contract for supply, you can still keep that in place. This would be an additional benefit above and beyond where it's a monetary credit being allocated to your bill.
So the Green Bank necessarily would not negotiate that purchase. That's the production side, in essence.
Yes, it would be a fixed rate contract with your utility company for the purchase of the power that the system's producing, not the power that you're consuming on site.
Let's back up just a moment and let's go back to CSW. Are they the installers?
Good question. So they are not. So what we will ultimately do is, assuming that the economics look good and these are projects that you want to pursue, you will be put into a portfolio of projects that we're developing throughout the state of Connecticut. And we will put the projects out to bid as a portfolio. So we have a contractor network that we work with throughout Connecticut, which would include developers throughout the entire state. And they will bid on each project individually and then the portfolio as a whole. And then ultimately we review those results and select a contractor.
You select the contractor, we have no say in it. And then part two of that, I apologize, are you okay with this kind of direction? You said that the Green Bank takes a portion of the production as a recouping the cost. Is it kind of the Green Bank for profit?
So,
And then what could that look like? So 24 cents a kilowatt? I'm just putting a number.
yeah,
Well, do you take 6 cents? Do you take 18 cents? You know, it's.
so to explain the revenues that go into the project, there's two pieces. First is going to be that state level incentive or the revenue contract with the utility company. And then second inflow of revenue, if you will, that goes into the economics of the project is going to be the federal tax incentives that would be available for the project. So as the system owner, we're going to be monetizing the tax benefits for the project. And that helps reduce the amount of the state level tariff that we would need to take to recoup our investment in the
So
equipment.
is that like that 30%?
Exactly. So
Completely go to the Green Bank, and then on top of that, if assuming there's on top of that, because you mentioned it, it's variable depending what the stuff it produces and the cost of it.
the variable piece is the cost of the system. So what we do is that site specific evaluation where they'll come out and evaluate each site. Gives us what we call a high level EPC cost breakdown, engineering, procurement, and construction of the system. And that's what we will base all the financial modeling off of it. You will have a transparent breakdown of what that looks like. So you can see costing of the system and how revenue is ultimately split.
Green Bank is the owner of the assets.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I apologize, I'm just getting myself back up to speed. It's a long story, but so you are for profit, but you're quasi state.
We're quasi-state, we will take a small profit on the project, which just covers my team's costs of development and existing essentially. But it is far from what it would be within the commercial sector for.
I just wanted to circle
Yeah.
back, thank you so
All
much.
nonprofits try to make profit. It's
Yeah.
just what they do with the profit.
I understand.
It's where the issue is.
No, I understand, okay, I just wanted to clarify, the quasi-state is fine.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it.
So at what point would we owe you money in this process?
So you don't. So in the power purchase agreement scenario, the model that the Green Bank uses, we can do either model, but typically the second power purchase agreement where it's a direct contract with the utility company, you're receiving a monetary credit on your utility bill directly from the utility, and then a portion is directed to the Green Bank to recoup our investment in the equipment. In that scenario, there's no exchange of funds between the town and the Connecticut Green Bank like there is in scenario one, which is you purchasing discounted power from the system. Both options exist, so we can look at both for you and we'll show you which one makes the most.
Let's say an array actually produces more electricity than the town can consume. So what happens there?
It's a good question. So in a front of the meter scenario, which is the second power purchase agreement option that I described, where we're installing a new utility meter on site and feeding the energy back to the grid, we're allowed to oversize the system above and beyond what you're utilizing on site. In a rooftop scenario, if you have more square footage, then would be justified based off of the consumption on site. So we can oversize the system in that scenario and you're getting a financial benefit, if you will, by doing so, but you would have to have the available square footage to make that work.
Well, one of the
Excuse me, can I
situations.
just
Yeah.
get right in for a second?
Okay.
I just didn't quite follow you. You said the financial benefit would cap at the side at the, so how would it come? If it wasn't taken off of your source bill, how would you be economically benefited?
In the scenario that I just described.
The maxing out in front of me.
Yeah. So if you were designing a system behind the meter, just looking to tie into the utility meter, offset the load for school, for example, or this building. If we were just looking at this building, looking to offset the load here on site, we would look at your utility bill. There's a chart on page 2 that shows us your breakdown of kilowatt hour consumption on a monthly basis each month throughout the year. We totalize that, and then we would design a system based off of your total load. Let's say you had 40,000 square feet of roof space, but you really only needed 5,000 square feet to meet the load of the facility. In a front of the meter scenario, they let you oversize the system, so you can build a much larger system size than you would actually need based off of your load for the facility, because you're feeding it back to the grid instead of consuming it directly on site. You're allowed to oversize the system.
And how would the town or whatever the entity is be financially benefited by that?
You would receive a monetary credit on your utility bill based
And
off
if
of the
it was-
production of the
But
system.
if it was greater than our utility bill,
Mhm.
how would we be benefited financially?
So good question. So the difference here is going to be monetary credit versus what you're actually paying per kilowatt hour for the power that's being produced or consumed on site. There's a difference between the two. So if you add up all the charges on your utility bill, I don't know what the dollar value would be. Let's pick a number and say that you are paying all in 20 cents a kilowatt hour. That 20 cents a kilowatt hour is not going to necessarily be equivalent to the monetary credit that you're receiving.
Right, I'm sorry.
So-
Asking the question the wrong way. Let me just try it. Hang on.
I know.
All right. Go ahead.
So, yes, so we're paying 20, we're making 24. Does that 4 cents turn into cash? Is that ever just these credits that continue on to oblivion?
See, it isn't a per unit issue. It's how many units you're creating. So it's not the 20 cents versus 24 cents.
In other words,
The 20 cents is the value that they're giving you per unit. But if we're, for example, we have a very large roof and we're maxing it out.
Mhm.
So the revenue at 20 cents would be $100,000. However, our bill is only 50,000.
Mhm.
let's make it 60, easier number. What happens to that $40,000 credit?
So what I'm trying to say is it's never, most typically never going to be equal.
Use better numbers, but what happens to the excess?
Yep. Let me just explain. So when I said 20 cents, I was trying to convey a number that could potentially be your all-in cost for electricity, not necessarily the credit value that you're gonna receive in a PPA scenario. I don't know what your credit value is going to be.
That's not my question.
Yeah, but
My
it's,
question is the added revenue. We're creating an array that brings in more power than we consume. So we have greater production. How is that production received by the town? I mean, does the town get money from Eversource?
Potentially, there's a few ways that you can look at the project. We may, in this scenario, if it's vastly oversized, again, I don't think that it's gonna equate for projects that we're looking at here, so I think it's a non-issue, but if it were, let's say that if it were. There's a program called virtual net metering that we could utilize, which would allow you to oversize the system, and you can virtually allocate monetary credits to additional utility bills that you have here on site through the town. So,
Look at the example, if we have a firehouse, a huge roof, doesn't use much electricity.
Yep.
How would that work?
so you could virtually allocate monetary credits, you're producing energy on site for the firehouse. But you can virtually allocate monetary credits to other accounts that you are paying through the town, so it could be a school, it could be town hall. It doesn't necessarily have to be specific to that one account, go ahead.
be my last chance at this, and then I'm gonna move on.
Yep.
Cause I think we're saying the same thing. So we have, in mind, or at least historically, we've looked at a ground mount solar array at some owned property. Property uses silts for electricity, so yes, we need the virtual plans. Just numbers. We spend, and it's not like, but I think I know where Daley's asking. We spend $60,000 a year as a town on municipal electric bills. This array miraculously creates $80,000 worth of credit. There's a $20,000 credit left over annually.
We can never consume.
So that's, I think that's the gist of the question is what happens with that credit? Does it just keep building into eternity in the credit land? Or does it financially turn into, after all costs, it turn into a check? Could it turn into cash?
Or could it turn into a credit for every person in town?
Well, anyway, yes. We have it for every,
Consume it.
all right, that, I'm in, but the answer.
Yeah, so virtual net metering is a different program than the power purchase agreement that I was describing. So it's definitely an option for you. State agricultural and municipal customers qualify to participate in that program. You have the ability to size the system up to 5 megawatts here in Connecticut through that program. If you don't have the load across all of your beneficial accounts that you all are paying for, to justify that large of a system size, assuming that you have the space, then we might potentially bring in another municipality to be an off-taker of that electricity. I know what
So
you're.
it doesn't turn,
I just-
it just doesn't turn into
Yes.
cash. That's the bottom line. I think the answer is it does not turn into cash. We'll just have to. think
Doesn't
outside the
matter,
box.
yeah.
Because our goal with what we were looking at was to at least get a net zero, actually maybe make some money. That was a different scenario than what we're talking about now, but sizing wise, that would be, I think, what this committee would really like is to at least get us to zero, which
So
is,
how much-
which is virtual net metering. But then Daley's is a great question. I would have had the same one is, well, what? And I think you've answered it. So the credits, it doesn't turn into cash. The best, if everything lined up and you made more, then we have to be creative to figure out what to do with those credits. Sell them to Cornwall and charge them.
Well, let's look at a real world scenario,
Yeah.
okay? So, you probably have done some projects with schools.
Mhm.
Okay, their electrical load is during school in session. Okay, and when at maximum electrical generation of the system during the summer, when the sun is directly above, it is the least amount of electricity they use. How does that work for the school then? I mean, where does those credits go?
So ultimately it would depend on which program you participate in. So if it was a behind the meter system that was tied to the utility meter specific to the school, and that system was to offset the load for the school, you would benefit from something called net metering, where you can think of your utility meter, like I like to think of it as a synthetic battery, if you will. We're not installing a battery storage on site, but your current utility meter without solar does one thing, and that's that it rolls forwards and you're being billed for the kilowatt hours that you're consuming. In a scenario where you have solar on site and it's tied in behind your utility meter, if your on-site system's producing electricity and you're instantaneously consuming it on site, your utility meter is going to stay neutral. If you're on site and you're not using a lot of electricity, but the system is producing a ton of power, your utility meter will roll backwards and you are going to bank credits that you will apply that month and in future months when you have to drop from the grid. It's an automatic process with the utility company, but you're netting out the difference between what your system is producing and what you're consuming on
So
site.
what you really want to achieve there, since there's no cash money back to the entity, whether it's a school or a municipality, you want to size the array appropriately such that those credits come back to offset costs. That, in other words, in the high demand, low generation period, you use credits from the low demand, high generation period to offset, the electricity.
Yeah, so it goes back to looking at your utility bill and looking at your total kilowatt hour
Right.
consumption over a 12-month period.
And then sizing appropriately for the 12 months.
Yes, and that would be specific to a behind the meter scenario. If we're looking at a front of the meter project, and if you have the available room to oversize the system in terms of roof square footage, you can certainly do so in that scenario. And you're just feeding energy back to the grid, and the utility company is calculating how much energy was produced by the system, and then you're getting a monetary credit based off of the power.
But only just a credit, never cash back.
And so it sounds like we would wanna size it for our usage. Can we oversize it to cover the extra expense that would go to like a green bank? Because you're taking off on that anyhow, you're siphoning off those credits.
So we're receiving a portion of what's called a tariff value, a buy all sell off tariff value, which is essentially a fixed rate that the utility company is going to pay over that 20-year period. You can oversize the system based off of your available square footage in a front of the meter scenario, but you can't, I guess in theory, if you add enough square footage, it could potentially cover the portion that we're looking at, but it's not necessarily the math that we're doing up front.
We could. Just to, under the guise that we have no square footage.
I don't know if it works that way, Greg, from what I'm listening to, or I have to admit. I'm not all that clear, but it does sound like it's a kilowatt per kilowatt. It's not a dollar per dollar.
Well, yeah, right.
Right. So I think that the answer to this question is no. I have another question, but I don't want to interrupt your presentation. What are you doing with battery storage? Anything?
Good question. Battery storage is always going to be an option. There is a program in the state of Connecticut, which incentivizes battery storage for projects. There's an upfront incentive that you can take advantage of. And then what they have in place is something called PBIs, or performance-based incentives. Basically what it is, when you sign on to the battery storage program in Connecticut, is you are giving the utility company permission to access your battery at specific points in time and dispatch that battery to reduce the demand on the grid. So think high demand periods such as spring and summer. When people are blasting their AC, it's putting a huge peak demand on the grid, and that's what the battery storage program is in place to do. Ancillary benefit obviously would be that it would provide resiliency, so I don't know if you have, generators at any of your facilities. But if you have generators that kick in the event of an outage, you may not need battery storage. If you don't have battery storage at any of your sites and something that you wanna look at, that would be a secondary benefit to participating in the program would be, resiliency in the event of an outage.
So it could be used to replace the generator. The backup generator.
It could. What I will tell you is that battery storage is more expensive than your generators are going to be. So if you have existing generators,
But you're paying for fuel for your backup generator, you're using solar for your backup storage.
what's the upfront expense
Of
of
what?
the battery?
Purchasing the battery.
Yes.
So would not that go into the financial model?
Mhm.
So that perhaps it would be offset by some of the excess production that could be created. So to put an example, say you have a firehouse with a very large roof. And it does have a backup generator because it's pretty important to have backup generation on an emergency facility. So you would be creating more power than under normal circumstances the firehouse would use. But it could also store the extra battery. Bring no more fuel to the generator, if the generator were sized for that purpose. It also could, beyond the capacity of the generator, allow the utility to use that power. Is that at this time a model under consideration, or could it be under consideration with the existing programs?
Yes, we can look at battery storage with any of the projects that we're gonna talk about, and we'll model it out for you. It's just going to be a financial model for you to weigh out and see if it makes sense for you to add it.
And then the other area that may or may not be part of what you're offering are these smart meters. I mean, are you building, when you're talking about before, in front of and behind the meter? Are these actually smart meters which could allow solar to be used in the case of an outage?
No, so traditionally, the solar on-site at these locations, the power purchase agreement option that I described is going to be a grid tied system. So in the event of an outage, you're going to lose power at a facility.
Do you understand why?
Yeah, you can't backfeed the lines, so in theory, the system would still work. But you
Are
can't,
you backfeeding the lines?
if you didn't de-energize the solar array, yes.
I thought that's what we were doing. You said that the meter goes in the other direction. You're backfeeding the line.
But that's when the grid is online. I'm talking in the event of an outage. You can't backfeed the line because linemen are working on it.
No,
No.
nobody would.
Yeah.
No, but the smart meter
Mhm.
could allow the facility, firehouse, to actually have the solar array, feed the storage facility, feed the battery, and keep the firehouse up no matter how long the outage went.
If you had battery storage on site, correct? We're talking about a system that's independent of battery storage.
Exactly. You wouldn't do it independent of battery storage. You would have to do it with battery storage. It's very difficult to smooth out your service. Right? Very hard. Okay, so there is no barrier to that type of an installation. It's just perhaps not the one that's been used the most. Maybe it isn't where the most incentives are right now.
Exactly, it's a cost benefit analysis on the financial side, but battery plus storage is an option. There's programming available in Connecticut. We can run the models for you and tell you what it looks like, and then you can pick
I would
it.
think that you raise a great issue, that, there must be many municipalities that have emergency centers like our fire department. Everyone probably has that, and they probably have a backup generator if the power goes out. And those that have installed solar electricity generation, they're just still keeping their diesel or propane generators there, or they not thought to put in batteries yet because it's still kind of a new concept.
Yeah, I think you'll find most of them are generators, not batteries. But again, it's new program in Connecticut. I think we're only in year 3 of the battery storage program in the state. So, but there may be more coming online. We hope so. But for existing sites that you see, may not be the case.
Okay.
It's more than likely generator backup.
Okay.
But
I'm really much better with written presentation. Instead of speaking that way, I can actually look at it and not get confused. Do you actually have something written that you can give to somebody here?
yeah, I have just a 1-pager that explains our program. I'll let Chet pass them along. And I can send over back as well. I'll send it to Peter and he can disseminate it. That kind of explains the incentive program and sure.
Would that be, Amy, thank you, Amy, passed along a website to the committee, greenbank.com/building-solutions/solar-program/solar-.
Yeah, I still think though that I'm with Melissa that you're answering our questions, but you're having to go back and forth between these different programs. And visually, it would be really helpful to see on a grid these different programs, whether there are 2 or 3, and comparative components like this has an upfront cost, or this doesn't, or this one has a credit and this doesn't, because honestly, I'm trying to follow along and it's the answers to the questions. I know you're really doing your best, but you have to, you're doing it in a way that describes the different programs all at the same time. So I'm with Melissa. I really need something visual to really understand this. My big question though is, how does the Green Bank, and I love Connecticut Green Bank, but how does Connecticut Green Bank determine the site that is worth their investment? Because clearly it is, as far as I understand, excuse me, every plan would be a green bank investment. We would not have any outlay of funds. We wouldn't own any of the solar arrays. If I understand that correctly, how do you determine that a site is worth your investment? And do you ever look at a group of sites as a whole package? Like maybe it's a roof here and a roof there, or a field here and a roof there.
Yeah, great question. So the things that we're looking at are your portfolio sites. We want to look at what you have for locations. We look at your utility bills so we can understand what the consumption is across all of the accounts that the town is paying for. We're looking at square footage. That's a key, whether it be a rooftop installation or, again, you mentioned virtual net metering. It sounds like there might be the parcel that you're interested in exploring. We need the address there so we can look at how much available space you have. For projects like virtual net metering, where you're looking at a larger ground array, one of the key items that we have to confirm is hosting capacity. Basically, that's the available capacity on the grid to be able to complete an installation without upgrades. Ground-mounted projects can get pretty costly if there's not 3-phase electrical service right at the road. And even if there is, sometimes there's not capacity in the lines at that specific site to be able to support a project without upgrades. And it's very expensive pretty quickly. So not every site is going to be a good fit. Specific to ground mounts, we are looking at that larger virtual net metering project. We're also looking at things like wetland delineations, state contour. So what is the grade of the parcel and is it going to make sense for solar development without, a lot of site work that gets very costly very quickly. So that's the type of information that we're looking at. We start with an aerial review, which we call a desktop review, just to give you a quick, like, yes, this is a good site. Maybe we need to do more due diligence on this site, or like flat out, this just isn't gonna work, and we'll give you that quick gut reaction before we start doing site visits. And the last item that I forgot to mention is roof age and condition, which you all probably put on your radar, but not every site is going to be a great fit for an installation because you might be 3/4 of the way through your roof warranty and it needs to be replaced in 5 years. We don't want to complete an installation and then have to come out and rip, have you do the re-roof and then reinstall the system. It's not going to financially make sense.
Have you ever gone to a municipality like ours here in Connecticut, and a municipality that has a desire to do something like this, that's what our committee here is charged to investigate and evaluate, and then basically say, no, doesn't make sense for you guys at all?
Real honest.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it certainly happened.
No, I mean, I think that's what Amy was actually asking in one sense. Implied in her question.
Yeah, no, I mean, it certainly happened where we talk with the municipality and all their roofs are due to be replaced and they're on a time schedule for those capital improvements and timing's not right for a project, but they want to understand it.
Okay, so really the project makes sense, it's just the timing isn't right at that moment.
Yes.
Okay.
What about, actual structural, getting an idea of the structural requirements, or,
Right.
is it feasible, like for our roof on our grammar school?
Yeah, so
The integrity of the roof structure itself.
yeah. I'm not a structural engineer and none of my colleagues are, but that is part of our development process. So once we run an RFP and secure an EPC contractor to build the project, one of the first steps in their process is engineering. That will include electrical engineering, where they're doing electrical one line that includes solar. Second piece is going to be structural engineering. So they're gonna go through and review any as-built plans that you have for each of your sites, whether it's digital or paper. And if you don't have any plans, then they're going out and doing field verification to see how the facility was constructed and whether or not you have the loading to support installing a system on site. There's 2 ways that you can complete a rooftop installation. One is mechanically attached. We're actually attaching the racking to the roof itself. And then there's a secondary installation method called a ballasted array. What that is basically slip sheets go down on the roof. Racking will sit on top of the slip sheets and then it's weighted down with ballast blocks instead of penetrating the roofing membrane. As you can imagine, that secondary option requires more structural capacity than the first. So whether or not that's an eligible or feasible installation method will come out as you get further into the process.
Capped landfills.
Capped landfills are great. Virtual net metering, we can utilize that program, and there is what we call a bid preference in the NRES program, where you'll receive you can essentially bid in at a higher value for the revenue contract with the utility company. If you're on a brownfield site or located in a distressed municipality, isn't gonna hold fire for that. Brownfields are great for that very reason because it's a good redevelopment method. But B, this incentivizes those projects at a higher level. Federal government does as well. So there's more investment credits that would be available.
Could one, let's say, mix and match the different programs to the different sites? Okay, so that it's not just one universal program for the entire municipality, but in that at that site, it's better to do this type of program, this site's better to do another type of program. What do you say about that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, and that's really where that initial due diligence comes into play, so we hop on a call, look at your full list of locations. Get a list of all of your utility bills, and then we can start breaking it down for you and giving you an idea of what's going to maximize your financial benefit by participating in this program.
Is Titan, your competitor?
Peyton is not a competitor, but they are an avenue for development. So if you're kind of exploring all of your options, Peyton, are you affiliated with them through CCM?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So they kind of offer two main services to municipalities. Number one, supply contract negotiations, which they may do for the town currently. But they also offer RP development services. So if you guys decided that you wanted to run your own solicitation, where you're putting the project out to bid, and seeking responses from a number of solar contractors throughout the state, they can offer services where they can help you run that process if you decide that you want to take it on directly and utilize a contractor.
Right, that's kind of their model there because they don't own it necessarily, but you guys, since you would be the asset owner, the system owner, it doesn't go out to bid at all, does it? It's just you propose the offer and we accept, right? Or decline, huh?
It does go out to bid, she was quite clear.
The contractor portion of the project. To bid.
Okay, the installation,
Exactly.
But under the green bank sole discretion.
right. So you choose those guys.
Exactly.
And then, but then you come back and then you choose which one. And then you still come back to us and say, this is the proposal.
Yes. So that's one important thing to know is, because we're putting the project out to bid as a portfolio with other municipal and state projects throughout Connecticut. If pricing, the EPC cost pricing comes in better than we're anticipating, you guys will receive that upside of that financial benefit. We will go in and do a contract amendment with you.
What other towns have you worked with in our area?
Yeah, I'm happy to send over a list. I just made a sample list of municipalities throughout the state, town of Portland, town of Mansfield, Manchester, Branford, Washington, Groton, there's ribbon cutting coming up with them next week for 2 schools. And Avon was the list that I put together beforehand.
So I'm learning a lot on this committee, talking to people such as yourself.
And I got a long way to go.
And it's very similar to the military. You use, what's it called, mechanism for everything, which is impossible to keep up on the listening side for feedback. It's just, but I think maybe I'm getting to the point where a lot of it is starting to make sense, but it's very difficult. And I think it stems from way above, Green Bank, of course, it probably starts at the federal level and just goes down. But, I think it's something that I would like this to be, and not to go down a rabbit hole, but to be able to educate our community. I personally had been on the Green Bank's website and it didn't make any sense to me either as an individual.
Okay.
Does the Connecticut Green Bank do any sort of community municipal education for the benefits of its private citizens?
Yeah, we'd be more than happy to do so. I'll also tell you on the 10, once the project is constructed, if you want, the Green Bank in partnership with the installer to come out. Schools, for example, are a great example where we can go in and do presentations that explain the educational component, how the solar system works. So yes, community engagement, happy to be involved anywhere that you think makes sense, whether it's a meeting or separate presentation on the program.
And that's just, I just wanted to ask that question.
Yeah.
We can have like another time, but it's just, I think the education of general public is, you can't hit them with front meter, rear meter,
Yeah, right, yeah.
SMPs, you know, MOUSEs.
What, I mean, it's sorry to bounce around with all the questions, because they come from all different angles, but they arise just, you know, because we're trying to get ourselves educated. As a system owner, and then also the one who is we're contracted with to receive, we receive power, we're also contracted for a volume of power too, right?
Mhm.
As well as then the rate we buy it. But if something fails in the system and we're not getting the volume, I mean, what is the response times? How do you fix that? How we're compensated if we did not get the volume we were supposed to get through the course of the year because of a breakdown in the system? I mean, can you talk a little bit about what your responses are to that?
Yeah, so for every project, because the Green Bank owns it, we're gonna hold the operations and maintenance contract. So we will contract directly with the contractor that's building the project, or it could be third-party maintenance company that's.
You don't
coming
go
up
out
to
and
do
fix it
it.
yourself. It's also,
We don't.
okay.
But we have those contracts
Yeah.
lined up. What they typically include is preventative maintenance services, so it will be an annual site visit. We'll coordinate it well in advance with you, where they'll come out and perform preventative maintenance services. All of the systems will have a monitoring platform, which you will have access to log in and track system production. Green Bank will have access to it, and then the operations and maintenance company that we're contracted with will be remotely monitoring that system. What that means is that they can instantaneously see if there's an issue with your system. There's different alerts that you can set up, such as inverters. Is an inverter down on the project? They're gonna know right away and give you a call to perform emergency maintenance at that point. That's the benefit of having those contracts set up, is that you have somebody that has eyes on it 24/7, and you have that contract in place to perform.
Right, and in your experience doing this across lots of municipalities and other types of entities, I mean, what is the failure rate on these things? I mean, these things are pretty much solid state in one sense, right? You install them, you turn it on, they work, and they're gonna work the rest of its lifetime, but sometimes something does fail. But so what is their failure rate? Do you have a sense of it?
It's pretty minimal, I would say. There's really three main components in the system.
Yeah.
Modules, or the panels themselves, the inverters, and then the third piece is the racking that modules sit
Right.
on. So it's really kind of a set it and forget it once the system's up and running. The issues that you have are gonna be pretty minor. The panels themselves are gonna be warranted for production through year 25 with the manufacturer. We're in a fixed 20-year agreement in the PPA or virtual net metering scenario. So, you know, you're covered on the warranty side. It's pretty limited in terms of issues that you may run into.
And then what happens after 20 years? Okay, so I mean, we're gonna be here beyond 20 years because we've been here longer than 20 years now.
Mhm.
But, you know, green banks and the contractors, there's no guarantee that you guys are gonna be here 20 years from now. So what happens after 20 years?
Yes, you have a few options that would be available to you. At the end of the term, we can come out and remove the modules. It would be completed on our giant. And the site would be restored at that point in time. You would have the ability to buy out the system at the end of the term. That's of interest to you for fair market value. Again, it's a 20-year contract. Panels are warranted for production through year 25. Actual expected useful life of a system, industry standard is typically between 30 and 35 years. So you've got a good amount of energy production that's still expected from that system at the end of the contract term.
So do we get that energy at the end of it, or do you guys get that energy? Who gets that energy at the end of 20 years?
So we have the option to decommission the system at the end of the
Okay.
contract term, or you can buy
Oh,
out the
okay,
system.
we would have to buy it from you.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's a really great question, Peter, as far as, it's a quasi-state. State of Connecticut scares, I think maybe everybody, I don't want to speak for everybody at the table, but scares me. What if they pull the plug on Green Bank in 10 years?
Yeah. So with a power purchase agreement contract, PPA, as we've been chatting about, or even virtual net metering, you have your revenue contract with the utility company set up from day one, and it's a fixed 20-year term. So if we ever cease to exist, there are existing contracts with fixed revenue contracts attached to them. Somebody will come in and buy out those contracts and handle the application through that.
So with the PPA is really with the power company then?
So that power purchase agreement is with the Green Bank, we're the
Okay.
system owner, with the
Right.
revenue contract for that system, that seat level incentive is coming from the utility company.
Was your contract standard contract or was it tailored to each customer?
It's a standard agreement.
And what about your bid process? Do you have preferred contractors or is it strictly a low bid?
Great question. So it's not strictly low bid. We definitely have a large contractor network that we work with, and we're looking at contractor experience, experience working in the municipal sector, in addition to obviously cost of the contract. And I would say in addition to that, it's really capacity to deliver. So what do they have in their pipeline of other projects, and are they going to be able to deliver on completing these projects in a timely manner?
So you put your bids out for public bids or?
As a state entity, do you kind of have to keep all that public?
Yes, and if you go on our website, you can actually see previous.
What about liability? Is somebody has to own some insurance, we own the property, you own the system. How does that split up?
Yeah, so the Connecticut Green Bank is gonna be the system owner, will fully insure the solar array on site, for example. The contractor will carry their own insurance throughout the construction phase. And then you're gonna wanna hold your own insurance for the property as you.
Is fencing required on the ground array?
It is, so it's an electrical code requirement, has to be a 7-foot high fence. Generally, there's a setback from that fence area as well, so don't be
So the state requirement or your requirement?
the fence.
Yeah.
It's an electrical code requirement. It's not a Green Bank requirement.
So it's a state requirement. Thank you.
I see on private property, it looks like there's no fences.
Mhm.
Is it a residential development?
Or
So there's a different requirement for residential in terms of fencing?
A good question. I don't do residential solar, so I'm not sure, but I know it's required on the commercial development.
So for maintenance,
Mhm.
whoever's putting the solar array up is the one that's doing the maintenance, correct? Or,
It doesn't necessarily have to be the installer, but I think you'll find that that generally is what happens.
and so if something has to be maintenance, you have annual maintenance or whatever, so that's a fee that has to be paid.
No, so the Green Bank holds that contract, so that's our cost and our response.
It's your responsibility.
Yes.
Okay.
And especially important because the agreement is that we are going to buy a volume of electricity, right? And so you would need to have, if something goes down, you need to get it up and running as quickly as possible to fulfill on that part of the agreement. Is that correct?
That's right. So I would say any of the scenarios that we're talking about today, we are mutually aligned in our incentive to make sure that your system is running and operating at all points in time. Because if it's not producing power, the Green Bank is not recouping our investment in that equipment and you're not receiving a financial.
So at the end of the day, you come in, you put the solar things wherever they go.
Mhm.
What if there is, who are we paying and when are we paying them as a town? This is what I'm like, because I know personally, I have a solar panel array on my roof and I pay Eversource. Sometimes it's more than other months just because there's not enough power, I guess, in the cells. And I pay also the company that put the panels on our roof. So I'm paying 2 bills no matter what per month. Sometimes Eversource is less. So the idea is for the town not to pay anything, correct? That's what I'm getting. We're gonna have a zero town bill. If not, who is the town paying?
Great question. So you will never get to the point where you have zero utility bill. It just won't happen. So you will always be paying a utility bill to Eversource, for a portion of your utility bill at any of the sites that we're talking about.
Okay,
For the solar portion of the project, just speak high level, because I know we've talked about a lot of options today. You're either saving directly on your utility bill by the system feeding your utility meter, and you're purchasing that power at a discounted rate.
Right.
Or, and you would be purchasing that from the green bank, because we're the system owner in that scenario, or in the virtual net metering scenario, you're just receiving a credit on your utility bill directly from the utility company. You're not actually paying the green bank for anything in that scenario, because we're taking a portion of that state level incentive, and that's how we're recouping our investment.
okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How small of an array do you, in your experience, makes it worthwhile for the green bank to be involved?
Our minimum is a 50 kW system. It's gonna be about 5,000 square feet on space. It's kind of overall.
And roof space, I mean, that's more, wait. Not more, but that's, yeah, maybe it is. It's more what you're focusing on, roof space as opposed to ground space.
You do both.
You do both.
What's the standard size of a panel?
They're constantly shifting, but now,
Might be.
I'd say 3 foot by 5 foot to give you a
So
ball.
15 square feet.
So you're saying
5,000.
5,000 square feet of panel or 5,000 square feet of roof?
A roof?
Yeah,
Or field.
which, I mean, equates.
It doesn't
Yeah.
have to be a roof.
So the amount of space that you need in a ground mount scenario is gonna be different than a rooftop, and we'll be able to guide you on that, just to explain why rooftop installation, if you've got an asphalt shingle roof, for example, you're just stacking panels in a row on your roof, and they're generally mechanically attached. If it's a flat roof, generally speaking, you're going to have modules on a 10-degree tilt on your roof, could be 5 degrees, depending on how tightly they want to stack things. You do have to leave room for what's called inner row spacing, meaning you don't want row 1 to
Shade
cast a shadow on row 2 and so on. So that's factored into the engineering up front. Ground mount applications, completely different, because you're generally tilting a ground mounted panel at a 30-degree tilt instead of, which is 5 or 10. So again, you need more space between the panels. So we'll calculate that all out for you and give you an idea of square footage. If you're looking at a roof, that 5,000 square feet is the minimum. For a ground mount, to give you an idea, you're typically looking at about 4 to 5 acres per megawatt that's installed. Is kind of the high level math there. And I don't know what you'll need in terms of sizing until we get your utility accounts, but it's.
What is the minimum space you need if it's not the roof? 5,000 square foot roof, but if it's a field, what is the minimum for you?
So it's gonna depend on if we're looking at a ground mount adjacent to a school, for example, because maybe your roof's not in great condition, versus doing a larger development, which would be a small utility scale development where you're feeding the energy back to the grid through the virtual metering program. It really depends on the program you're participating in and what the setup is going to be, but.
So the one program and where we got, how this all started is, they were talking roughly an acre's worth of panels to feed the line that's there, which I don't believe is 3-phase, I think closer, 126 is single phase too, right? So this single phase, but this is, it's already been looked at and, hope for the town, we were gonna originally think about purchasing our own thing, and then we breaks and needed to learn a whole lot more. With that being said, does that even remotely sound like something the Green Bank would want to look at? To see where we were, and that is what this other company equated to be pretty much a net zero to the municipal use year round.
Okay. Yeah, we'd be happy to take a look at it. That's definitely,
So I mean, a meg on that site and at the landfill site without the 3 phase is. Realistically, I doubt they would ever want to upgrade the lines for that. However, being a single phase line, it's already gone to the point where this company proposed. So that must kind of work, just as a peak of where, what we know today.
yeah, I'd say put all the sites on it and we can give you an idea. Even if it doesn't have 3 phase directly at the roadside, if it's a quarter mile or half a mile up the street, we'll do the math for it and show you what the dollar value and upgrades is gonna be and if it makes sense. We're talking about 2 to 3 miles of upgrades, it's probably not going to make sense, but we can take a look at it and.
On a ground mount, like let's say 4 acres, let's say, is 1 megawatt. But your minimum is around 50 kilowatts. So way smaller than 4 acres. Okay.
Yes.
So ground mount system would have to be tied into 3 phase. And yeah,
Well, no, what I heard is, not this, it depends. I heard that it depends.
Yeah, if you're looking at
And it
a
depends on
ground
the
mount
size.
at a school, for example, and you're tying in behind the utility meter, it doesn't matter, but if you're looking at an independent, non-developed site, we need 3 phase there.
Yeah, so we're talking about a transfer station, which is all single phase. And that's where the 1 acre proposal from this other company came into play.
Which was
yeah,
probably a
and-
quarter
and
of a
that's what-
megawatt.
Exactly what the guys from Titan said, exact same thing. And when we, early on, when we were talking about developing it over there, the question came up and we were assured that it didn't matter. The question is
To that size,
that size,
to
but
that size.
I think it's saying contrary to that, any ground mount system. And I think the other guy said the same thing, that, you would wanna tie it into 3 phase.
Yeah, I
I
would
think-
say
I think
send
we
me the
have
address and I can take a look at it. That's
We
the
We have to
easiest
look at
place
the
to start.
size.
Nothing
and-
over there except for the pool pump to
Yeah, there.
chews up that much power, right?
So just a matter of, yeah, so yes,
Yeah.
and yes, I think we just need more information, or they would need more information. I mean, this other company also does it and they propose that it would work, so it's just a matter of. Is it worthwhile? And again, what may happen, Chris, is the cost of it may be too high in that for the food bank and maybe, or whomever could be interested.
Yeah,
I think just more information, so steps forward.
yeah, so options available to you. You mentioned you have a quote for that one site and chatted with you. Green Bank's not the only program out there. We're really here to fill a gap in the marketplace. So if you don't find that you have the resources with any of the companies that you've engaged, we're happy to take a look at your portfolio and have you participate in our program. If you find that you've had a good relationship with the contractor that's provided you a proposal, and it's something that you want to pursue, we're not here to step on anybody's toes in the marketplace. You have a good contractor relationship and they've given you a proposal that's feasible. Happy to vet them for you if that's helpful, but there's a great contractor network in the state. The Green Bank's just looking to fill any gaps in the marketplace, not necessarily.
Well, you fill way more than a gap because you carry an entire project from beginning to end, so that's not just filling a gap.
Yes. So, weigh that out and evaluate it. If you do want us to continue the discussion and start looking at your portfolio, what we would do is, we can send you a list via email, or we can hop on a call and work through it together. Ultimately, what we need for each site, would be, again, utility information for any of the beneficial accounts that you're paying for. If you do want to look at on-site projects, we would want to have an idea of the age of the roof for those sites. And that'll get us started. From there, we'll do a desktop review and then further into the process. If there's interest in.
In full disclosure, from my viewpoint, it's just purely my own. We would have to get that far with you and Titan and anybody else even have any idea what's the best for the town.
Mm,
So that must be a normal. Every day when you look at a project, I mean, I think every municipality would have to get to that
Go
level
through
with you.
step one.
Because we just don't know until you do your calculations.
Right.
Company B does their calculations, company C does theirs. And comes back to us with that information to try to interpret.
Is
Is that?
that the normal process?
Yeah, I think you want to kind of determine how you want to develop a project. So I heard you say we don't necessarily want to own the project anymore. I don't know if that's the proposal that you originally received from company A.
Yes.
Was that, okay,
We were gonna be the only.
okay. So Titan would definitely fill the gap if you want to run your own RFP and solicit contractors. Typically, again, that would be an ownership scenario, but feel free to reach out to Adam if you have questions on it and see if they have additional services that they can offer. But if you are looking for a third-party ownership scenario and you don't necessarily want to take on that development work and trying to vet out contractors, that's what we're here for. We're gonna run that process A to Z for you. And again, I mentioned at the beginning, we have a dedicated project manager that oversees that development milestone once we select a contractor through the point that your system is energized. So in terms of time and energy to dedicate towards evaluating the solar project, what we try to shoulder for you is you don't have to, dedicate multiple hours per month in terms of sitting down and evaluating these projects. We're gonna do the work behind the scenes for you, present it to you, and allow you to make a decision.
Amy, do you have anything further?
No, I still could benefit from some kind of visual.
I think, yeah, one thing that is pretty clear, except for, I mean, Daley's done a lot of research. A lot of us aren't really that savvy with solar or, the proposals that. I guess we need to learn more. We don't, obviously, we don't want to make an uneducated guess, or a decision. So, I think what it would come down to is us having some more discussion within our group. Can you get us a comprehensive list of references and, maybe forward it to Peter? You already have his email.
Sure.
Anything else that you can think of?
Yeah,
Joanna?
at what point would we have to go into contract with you?
So you will have the upfront initial analysis complete. You will give you high-level modeling to review and evaluate, and that's gonna show you your financial benefit by site and project type. And if you decide it's something that makes sense and you want to pursue it, that's at the point that we would execute a contract. Post-contract execution is when we would include you in the solicitation to secure a contractor to build the launch. So you'll work your way through that point of, you have all the financial models in front of you and you can evaluate, yes, this makes sense, or it's not something that we want to pursue. And if you don't want to pursue it, there's no obligation to pursue it.
Well, give us an idea here. Engage, design, review, and execute. Where are we contracting? At number one, engage?
No, it'd be after review.
Okay, so
The
contract
execution.
on 3, huh?
So
Yeah.
when
we
you
make-
execute, that's when the town has agreed that this is the proposal for this project. That's when we.
What do you know about the proposed federal $8 billion solar incentive for municipalities? Is that trickled at all down to the states? I mean, it must be chitter chatter around the coffee pot.
Yeah.
And what kind of timetable? And I guess it's gonna lead me to the next question of, is it worthwhile for towns to hang tight if we don't have a project in the pipeline in case?
Question. So we are just starting to hear on some of the applications that went in at the federal level for funding. In terms of information and how that funding is going to be utilized, there's proposals in place. Connecticut submitted one application through Connecticut Deep, but it was multiple agencies throughout the state that were a part of that application, and we're really just working out the details in terms of how the funding is gonna be disseminated. I'll send you tomorrow an invitation. There is actually a upcoming workshop that we're running. I want to say it's 3 weeks out. But it's going to be to talk specifically about how we can utilize funds that are being received. I'm happy to disseminate that workshop information if you guys are interested in potentially attending.
Sure.
How would we be benefiting? We don't own any of this anyway, and we're just getting paid a rate for 20 years. How do we benefit from any of these potential incentives?
Yeah, so if we're receiving federal funds, there's the potential that it could be applied to projects, reduce our cost of capital, and in turn, it would be a higher financial benefit to the municipality.
So
by
we
participating.
would get a higher rate of on the, we would be paid a higher rate for the next 20 years. And is that PPA, is it contracted for 20 years at a fixed rate for the 20, or is it a variable rate tied to something?
Sure. So you can do a variable rate PPA. It's not, I would say as popular. And traditionally where variable rate PPA would come into play would be in the behind the meter scenario where you're tying the solar system directly to a utility meter at a set facility to reduce your cost of electricity. In the variable rate power purchase agreements, typically you have a published starting rate, and then there'll be an annual escalator that's factored into that rate on an annual basis. You want that rate that it's escalating the cost of power at to be below what we've seen historically, the cost of power to be increased at annually, here in the state of Connecticut. Obviously, the last 2 years have kind of been an outlier in terms of the massive increases that we've seen. I believe we use a 2% utility inflation rate escalator in our financial modeling when we're calculating savings. So if you did lock into a variable PPA agreement, you would want 1% escalator or 1.5%, for example, would be what we would recommend. It's not super typical. Most people like the idea of it being fixed for the term.
And one last question. Let's say we do something. In your experience, what is the risk to the town? Is there a risk?
No, there really isn't.
Well, sign us up.
It's not, you're not investing in the equipment, you don't have any of the operating risks or ongoing operations and maintenance, and in the contracts that would be proposing to you, you're receiving a fixed monetary credit from the utility company directly. There's no downside to participating.
Okay. That's very reassuring.
Any questions from?
Emily or Amy, last chance?
No, that was a really good last question, Peter. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. I will send you more information tomorrow via email. Feel free to
Send
send
it me and I'll send it around. Thank you so much.
And if there are more questions, feel free to reach out. You guys have my contact.
Right, and we will have more questions, and we will be in touch. Okay?
Yeah.
All
sure.
right, sounds good. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you all.
Okay.
Good
Bye.
evening.
You too. Bye.
Now what? Well, it's all Crystal Clear. We've learned so much. What do you mean now what?
Any other comments or?
We're never gonna be experts. No way. Yeah.
Right.
So it's almost, and if there's like, if it truly is no risk, then we'll jump in and do something.
Well,
That would be my recommendations. I don't know what to do and with whom. So-
yeah, and I don't either, but I know that there are two basic objectives, I think, that I believe that our town wants to achieve. One is we want to be good stewards of the environment, certainly, and responsible stewards. And the second is to be prudent with our town's resources, which is money, part of it. And I'm wondering, it's really, there's a lot of effort And there will be a lot of time regardless of which direction we take, because, you know, it's a learning curve and we will be having to make some decisions along the way and educating ourselves. So there will be an investment of time at the very least. And I, you know, just, I would love to be good stewards only, but of course, people will want us to also save the town money. So I don't know which one does both best.
Right, so there's also additional information, you know, for us to get. I spoke with, the principal of the high school, regarding what they're currently doing, for solar. And, I have a follow-up meeting, but I wanted to first come in and explain to you what it is they are doing before I go.
Good. Yeah, what are they doing?
So they have a number of installations and they're about to start a third. Now,
Who's he?
the
I'm
high
sorry.
school,
So who's he already has solar somewhere?
yeah. They have two and they're working right now on a third.
Where, do you know where the two are?
Let me
Thank
just-
you. No, because my daughter goes to high school and this is the first time I'm hearing about there being solar.
Yeah, and I think that in fact, there's been a missed opportunity in the towns, all of our towns, knowing that this is going on.
And to have partnered with them, huh? Because I mean, they are in our town, huh?
Well, anyway, they are under the auspices of the Board of Education, the Regional One Board of Education. And they've done very tight analysis. Part of my meeting, with, Streever, talk about having a learning curve, he was referring to various rooftops. And they could have been anywhere. I mean, oh, well, there's this on the ag and that on boom, and you know, I mean, it was hilarious. But I will be meeting with the maintenance people to be more specific about that. But I did see some of their actual documents of what they're doing. They have two in place. They have a third that they're proposing to do. I'm not prepared tonight to give you even an overview on it because I need more pieces to fit together so that I can make a sense of the whole thing myself.
Yeah.
I'd assume one of those daily would be like, how do they get the installation, like, program?
Oh,
Must be one
yeah,
of your
we have,
questions.
they have the information and we're very happy to share it with us, understood what we're doing here. And, so one of theirs, maybe all three, but at least one is with Green Bank. They're not using any storage at this time. You can tell I keep asking the storage questions. Anyway, for the battery
And
questions.
she didn't even say that they were a customer, but maybe it's a minor customer or because it was educational.
She might not, yeah, she
She
might
may
not
not
know.
even be
not-
I
aware.
asked for,
Yeah,
Battery seems to be something that is a little bit, behind the curve.
yeah.
Because-
Not in terms of battery, but just as a customer.
Yeah, she never said anything.
But-
But anything about
But
what?
they may not be,
We asked her if
she might
she
not,
had any
yeah.
customers in this area
they
and
probably
she
use
rattled
it
off
for things.
Avon and whatever.
Well, I believe they were involved in one. They have also been involved in the one down Sharon, but
Like
she
what
may
they-
not. She may not be on top of it. That's okay,
She doesn't do the accounting.
yeah,
Yeah,
But
there's
anyway.
only like 3 people.
I can see at some point the necessity to begin creating a chart so we can evaluate these different vendors. Or, equally, apples to apples on all.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
but-
That would be really helpful visually.
could you
and I
just
think
sketch
the
out
way to
how?
do that is to engage to get to
To
3.5 here and whatever it was with Clayton.
right,
How many
So-
vendors do you foresee?
Well, I mean,
What are our choices?
right now we have two, right? And we have that third one, which seems like a no option anymore.
Right.
Which is.
The first one.
which was the
Well,
original.
I'm not sure that it's not.
Yeah,
We just have
If
to
they
check.
guide him,
as presented.
right, as presented, so,
Well, they did update it some and they're happy to come back and talk to us some more.
So, you know,
But-
yes, yeah,
Before we lose just Sergey's idea, I think putting what we're learning in a format that can standardize it so that people at home, you know, that aren't getting our handouts can understand what we're talking about. I could never have followed Titan if he hadn't sent me what he was talking from. So I totally understand what Emily and particularly you and you're saying. But how would we, I have some suggestions, but rather than start that way. How, Sergey, would you go about putting all of this information into a framework?
I don't know if I know enough about this
Mhm.
at this point to understand what the important criteria are. Begin
Well, we have
mapping
is-
out a chart.
Yeah, we have what they're telling us they're doing, and some of that is, so she laid out her proposals, not extensive, but they were the primary ones. He didn't do that, Titan didn't do that at all. They were saying that they just come in and they act as a consultant to guide us through all these.
They're not the system owner.
So, and then that's another factor, whether or not we have, and they're not even a bidder. As he presented it,
Right,
not about the system ownership at all. So anyway, so we have so far three rather different approaches to it. Okay, so I hear you, you don't really feel that
So
at
that's-
that point you
Well,
have.
I got home after a meeting and I looked some of this stuff up because I didn't understand it.
Totally, I'm sure,
Mhm.
yeah.
but this is apples and oranges and
It's not the
bananas, okay? So I mean, to put it in a chart to understand, to compare is very difficult.
Right, and the way, I think you gotta start kind of looking at it globally, and I know Daly has some great suggestions and I can't wait to hear them. But I think that, we have to, everybody needs to be comfortable with, virtual net metering. I know now what that means, I would have not known before typing and reaffirmed tonight. You have behind the meter,
Right. And in front of
and
it.
then you have in front of the meter, so, globally, you have to just start putting it in those buckets.
Yeah,
And what does that bucket look like for,
right.
what each, Clayton and Green Bank and. I forget the other
Greenleaf.
people's names, or
Greenleaf.
Greenleaf,
Yeah.
they'll have green somewhere in there, if you look right there. But so you can have to start separating it into those categories to even know what they're offering. But you also, I think in this group, need to understand what that means thoroughly, and that may mean to be re-explained again.
Yeah.
Also, I really must say, I did find Adam much easier to follow
Mm.
than her.
Well, we
But-
promoted.
He kept rubbing it.
Well, both with.
I was gonna say, she needed a whiteboard. Badly, and Adam did, he had something that, we can follow. She did not have anything, I mean, because this little snaky thing,
It doesn't really.
Yeah, Adam went off script also. I think, we're kind of one of the last municipalities in the area to go venture into this, and I wonder if, someone from Sharon or North Canaan or Norfolk or somebody else, some of the towns that have already gone through this exercise.
Well, like you
Would
mentioned,
specifically
Sharon,
give us
it's still
some-
very controversial, and they're still having trouble with it. I don't think that we're necessarily that far behind.
When Parati was first selectman, he was very happy to talk about it. But then that was still under Henry with the first proposal, so he didn't want to, and now it's Brian Ola who didn't do it, but I'm pretty sure that they're very willing to us.
Well, as I say,
I mean, they were when I called.
but we haven't run into any trouble having people come in and give
No.
presentations, or, to get an appointment to, quickly. get an
Maybe,
overview.
maybe what we can do here, Daley, you're further investigating what they're doing at the high school. Perhaps, once you understand that a little more and there's a point person, maybe we could invite that point person here to give us a presentation on not necessarily what they're doing,
What their
but
process is.
how they came to a decision.
Yeah,
I mean, that would be Sam Herrick, most likely, right?
Yeah.
120%.
Is that who you're
That would
meeting
be
with?
good.
No, you're meeting
I
with
don't need to
Streeter.
meet with Sam. Sam is the money guy.
Mhm.
And what I think we want to learn is not how to read a spreadsheet. We want to learn what the procedures
Have you got
are
that?
and what you want to read the spreadsheet, we'll get you a spreadsheet. But, we need to understand what the components are and what the trade-offs of these components are, and
Mhm.
also why some of them aren't even mentioned. That's when you keep hearing.
Such as what?
Batteries
The batteries, okay.
and smart meters.
Got it.
Yeah, with the battery, and I'm totally on board with Daly and the need for batteries and how great it is. I think what I'm reading in between the lines of 80 was they don't have that experience, and it was unaffordable, and it's quickly going
That's
affordable.
right.
But somebody like Green Bank is gonna, us on an individual level, at our own places, would be interested. Green Bank is just not there yet. They don't,
But other
I think they're going, I think they're gonna have to be,
programs are.
and that's what you were trying to get out of her, but she didn't know about the program.
Well, here's the other thing too, is that I don't think she's, able to. And I would fight it, putting for the town to invest money at the firehouse to put in batteries. We already have a generator. We've spent the money on a generator. Until the generator needs to be,
Well,
it's just, I don't think it's good money.
We don't know what the money is yet.
well,
No, I think we really need to say the town is in such a hole financially. Not everybody,
Talking about
So-
costing the town anything yet.
exactly. So as
No,
long
no.
as we stay in it's not gonna cost the town money, but it's gonna save the town money, then I
Yeah.
think all options should be
Well,
explored.
Be explored.
and with the batteries, don't be, everything that I'm learning, and I'm trying to learn a lot because I want to do a personal project completely off grid with batteries. Is you still need to have a generator because not all months
Right.
produce
Right.
enough
Yeah.
to offset if you're gonna live off it, which in the scenario that you speak of,
Seriously, you have to
Mhm.
talk about your going off grid, because there's a different way of doing it, and you're still off grid, and that's
I'm-
why.
I'm not on the grid.
No, I'm not
On the
saying,
grid.
whatever it is you're looking for, we're going.
But that doesn't matter. The point of it is what I've learned, and I'm still trying to learn more, is like most people that I see like this, they still have a generator to charge the batteries. Is an emergency services center, you would need to still have that generator, but it is bought and paid for. You're not burning the propane. I like the idea of the batteries there. If somebody bought
If
them
it's
for
cost,
us,
if it's cost
if
effective.
it makes sense,
It's just, you just look at the numbers at the end.
and we just don't know what these programs are yet for.
And the
battery
other thing
storage.
that I keep running into, whether I'm reviewing a proposal that came from outside of the state, or listening to the high school, or any of these other things. So far, it's all driven by these incentive programs. And we were just learning from her tonight, and there's also a lot that's online about these new incentives that are coming down. So what was fixed a year and 2 years ago, and was the only options available, this made a lot of money and the others were totally out of the question, that is changing.
Yeah.
It's changing fast.
I agree with that. I agree that, and I understand the logic behind, stored energy and having it accessible, in times when, there's a lot of demand. Um, that I think that would drive um, program where they would maybe outfit the firehouse with
Yeah.
batteries where we already have a generator,
Well, so like,
to offset the use,
Okay, well,
the
anyway,
power company spends a lot of money already incentivizing a company like ours to shut off the switch when they need the electricity.
Yeah.
In my mind, they're foolish to not do the batteries.
That's right.
Spread all
Right,
over
right.
instead of feeding a big user. Because I can't offer them as much as we could offer them as a town with battery, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they can't afford a new power plant. Nobody wants a new power plant. How are you gonna power the power plant? It's, to me, it's a no-brainer, the battery, because the technology has come thus far this quick. Where it makes sense for the utility.
We did a project at Southern College, 20 years ago. Northeast Utilities came in and changed every single light bulb on the campus. Save money, because they don't wanna buy they don't wanna put money out for another nuclear power plant or any power plant. It's cheaper to buy, and it costs them a
Cheaper
boot,
to
It's just
to
cheaper to
conserve than to ramp up better, production.
right. So I would just like everybody to understand that if you want to hear more about the high school.
Yeah.
Yes,
We do.
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
do.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
and I'll come back with that kind of information the best that I can, and then maybe somebody. I don't think it's going to be the finance guy, I think it's going to maybe be somebody who's talking more about components. But also, in the process, I might be able to get more information on some of the incentives that that Connecticut is looking at, as opposed to the ones they've offered in the last 2 or 3 years.
So are you suggesting that Green Bank or Titan would be, let's say, holding back incentives that are not
No.
available?
I am not at all.
So-
They are just not available yet, they're coming.
Right.
And
But
there
so-
may even be ones that they haven't become aware of because they're not, most people don't ask for these things. We also heard the same thing from Titan. I asked Titan about battery storage and he started talking about putting in industrial storage devices, which is ridiculous. So anyway, all right, I will.
I use this book.
Okay,
just-
does anyone have anything else to add?
Yeah, I just had a thought that perhaps there are solar engineering consultants out there that we could hire for a short period of time to help us set up an evaluation sheet.
I think that's what Titan was saying they would do.
I think that happens already with Titan and the. Green Bank.
And, yeah, well, it happens with them to find an installer and an owner of the system. But are you suggesting just to help in the decision of, to choose who, which one?
Right,
I think it's too early to ask, in my opinion, I think it's too early to ask, because we need to have these
We're gonna have-
companies go through their
Yeah.
exercise.
If we can all maybe think of a way to, I'm not the spreadsheet manufacturer guy, but a way to catalog what we've learned so far from.
I think it's gonna come, I think, again, get closer to that form is we need these, let's use these two companies. I propose we give them the information they want to start acting.
Yes.
That would require us
give who the
to
information?
Both companies.
Titan and
Titan
Green
and Green
Bank,
Bank?
Connecticut Green Bank, just give them if they just want our power bills on our sites.
Mm-hmm.
That would require this committee to.
Catalog.
Power bills are easy, right?
Yeah.
But it would
Yeah.
require us to meet and go over sites.
Yeah.
That we would.
Yeah,
propose
Paul,
to the
some-
town.
I think this is the best idea, because all in all, I find them similar in their approach.
Yeah.
So we just have to see,
What do we
what do
have
they
out
come
there?
back with?
I went through
What
the
do they
town
propose?
budget, I went to the town budget and pulled out electricity and I think it was like, maybe what, 35,000?
I think it comes close to 58, but that might include the school.
No, then the school was also like 20 something. So yes, it
So
was
you're-
up, it was up to 60,000 total,
Yeah, that's
Or
my
the
recollection.
entire township.
When do we want to meet again?
I just wanted to just add to what you guys were just saying. I think Greg's idea is a really good one because, hey, it's just one task. We have to get both of them this information anyway. And maybe what I'd be willing to work with like Melissa and Sergey, who talked about having something visual to compare with, just to put a list of questions over on the left column. And, then we can divide up the columns further and to see, what the answers are as we go along. What, Melissa and Sergey, are you willing to work on that?
Yeah, I'll work on it independently, like putting down a list of keywords that we've been hearing and maybe using that as the
A
basis
glossary.
for starting,
Yeah, right.
starting a chart.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
I'm
no, I
basically
would do
thinking
keywords. I
about-
would do key questions.
Well, you can do both, huh?
So I
Sergey can
don't
do
need keywords. Keywords just don't answer anything for me. I mean, I just
Amy,
need, I
you
need,
have to do the same thing.
Well, we all function a little differently,
Yeah.
so.
So 2 weeks, I need from now
Okay.
to the 15th for me to be able to
Is that
try to
matter?
get
Does the
this together.
15th work for everyone?
I need to look at the.
Yeah,
Is that enough time? Should we push 3 weeks?
All right.
I'm gonna aim for 2, and if I get into trouble,
15th should work.
For the 15th, we can go over sites at the minimum anyway.
Yeah, I think we're gonna wanna start to focus on that. Does anyone have, an objection to going a little later,
Oh, starting later?
6 o'clock.
Oh, later in the evening.
Do you have to have dinner at a certain time?
Is that a problem?
No, I can start at 6. It's just at 5 o'clock. Sure, great, guys.
So are we doing 6 o'clock on the 15th?
Yeah, let's go for 6 on the 15th,
Okay, thank you.
if that works.
Okay, it's on my calendar. Thank you.
And the agenda will focus on Gailey's presentation about the high school.
As far as I've gotten on the high school, I'll be ready to give it.
Do you know where those installations are at the high school, on the roofs
I
or?
will report to you in 2 weeks. I don't want to try to
Yeah.
Muddy the waters?
I beg your pardon?
You don't want to muddy the
No, I really
waters?
do not. But,
Just representative ratings.
yeah, but, so are we also going to have somebody who, lists, for example, potential locations?
That's what we'll work on the next one. So I think if we all kind of.
Yeah.
No, I don't even know at all the, property
Yeah, I don't know.
right? Cause
Yeah.
that's what we would start with. That's my guess.
That,
Well,
and I guess.
Science school
make-
isn't town owned, and I mean, the grade school isn't town owned, it's the Board of Ed owned, and.
Well,
and
that
the
is.
Fire department is not. town
No,
owned.
but we could propose them and then obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
You have to just-
those are, there's 10 acres that was Dr. Borneman's property.
Right.
Obviously, I'm all for the landfill. I think that's a no-brainer. If we're gonna put it down
Brownfield.
there now, put it on the brownfield and be done with it, and there's extra
Right.
incentives, win, 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 win. But to kind of check the
Well,
grade,
but
I
there's-
haven't had a chance to get down there.
The question was again,
But
the 3 K.
You could still bring it up and maybe get some or bring it into the hillside.
Yeah, I don't,
What about the?
that's gonna be have to determination that they'll have to.
Okay,
But the other thing- I have,
Let's.
suggested to Chris, is right now, our Falls Village does not have any regulations pertaining to solar installations, particularly the type that we're talking about, not individual residential. Other towns do, and,
Ordinances?
yeah, it's part of their, usually it's part of the, P and Z list of, special situations. And I think that, we should at least be coming up with whether or not there's a consensus that we should request it of P and Z. And I'm saying so because, for example, in other towns, they say it cannot go on highways unless it's protected. You cannot be basically creating an eyesore on a highway. It's just as an example, and, there have been times when we've been thinking about doing that, so do we want to consider?
Do we want to get
Committee.
those in before they?
Well,
Wanna be grants?
I would say no.
where that comes from, and I don't know this through P and Z, but I know it's just through private life, is there's a lot of talk of putting a bigger array on Sand Hill.
This is not,
Wait,
but
wait,
this is not the charter of this committee.
Well, no, it's solar.
Not
It
the
has a
charter of
private.
this committee whatsoever.
I agree with you. I'm asking the committee to consider whether or not they would request of
Okay.
P and Z.
And I think that makes
Because
sense
it
if this
is
committee
solar.
No, I don't think
goes
so.
that
Well,
direction.
that's okay. We
Yeah,
can,
but I would vote against that.
that's fine. Okay,
I think, Gailey, that you're more than welcome to. And I know you probably will. We'll talk to the P and Z.
we've already done
Yeah, yeah,
that. Right. So the point is,
I agree with you entirely.
it needs to start here, that we make a recommendation, and it doesn't really go to P and Z, it concerns P and Z, but we make our recommendations to the select people. That is who we report to. So whatever it is that we want to do, we would like to select.
Move to adjourn.
Aaron, second.
Survey
Second.
six,
Thanks for everybody's participation.
Yeah.
That's great.
CK.
I think we're moving forward with this.
I think I've learned a lot.
I think I need to.
Right.